This is the E-commerce Edge podcast with your host, Jason Greenwood. Mr. Trevor Sumner, CEO of i-Genie AI. Welcome to the pod.
It's a pleasure to be here, Jason. Thanks for having me.
It's awesome to have you along for the ride with me today. And we can see the city, the great, famous city of New York, out the window of your office. We were talking about off air that you probably have one of the most impressive views I've ever seen behind, like real views, not like a video view or a virtual view, but a real view of any of the guests I've ever had on my podcast before.
I'm here to provide. I like to be superior where I can be.
You like to spice things up. I like it. Listen, before we talk about i-Genie and what you guys are building over at i-Genie and have done for the last year and a half, tell us how you came to be into this, I would say, broadly speaking, consumer insights, digital capability and enablement. How did you come to be in this space? Now, certainly, if we look back across your career, typical serial entrepreneur, have done lots of things in lots of different industries, but why this industry and why now?
And mostly, if you ask my wife, because I'm a glutton for punishment, saying, why don't you could make this easier on yourself. I graduated college in 1998 and caught the first internet boom and went to an e-commerce enablement company called Trilogy. And we were building large e-commerce systems. At the time, complex configuration pricing. I sold a shopping cart, just a shopping cart functionality for $250,000. That was a level of consulting. Literally multi-million-dollar e-commerce infrastructure that is less powerful by a lot than what you can get for $9.99 on Shopify these days.
Yep.
Incredible. But that company ended up IPOing, and I got the bug and, first internet waves, and I've been doing mobile internet infrastructure and a lot of like marketing tech research. I founded a company, a local online marketing platform, driving people from online to in-store. Grew that to over 100 people, 8-digit revenues, sold that to Blackstone groups. So I've always been around kind of commerce enablement, retail marketing, a lot of the search, social review data. And when I sold my last company, which is a computer vision in store mixed with retail media in store, a company called Perch, and ended up selling that. And so it was in my lockup period. And I was telling my investors, hey, I'm looking around. And one of my investors, Silicon Road Ventures, based out of Atlanta, said, hey, there's this really interesting company that's being built by these incredible veterans that you should take a look at. And that's how I got connected to i-Genie. It was computer vision as a type of AI, large data analysis, trying to make sense of all the signals from the noise and interpretive data. So I had a background in AI, I had a background in marketing data, background in retail tech, retail commerce. I'd been an investor in 24 startups, mostly around retail tech and marketing tech. So I've been always around it, but not really in consumer insights, which is its own different type of beast, which we can talk about too. I joined i-Genie a year and a half ago. We were about 20 people. We're now over 80. So it's been an exciting ride, and can talk a little bit about that. But that's how I found my way to i-Genie, and proof that careers are long arcs, right? And one of the reasons that my investors thought of me is because that computer vision and retail company went through COVID, and during COVID, we lost 70% of our clients in 60 days. And they saw what type of steward I was for their money, their investment, that relationship, and how I fought back to eventually have it successfully acquired. And one of the questions I've always asked myself was like, was it worth it? I killed myself for 2 years of COVID, but landed me here and into this and to i-Genie. And again, careers are long arcs, and that's how you find me here.
Wow, what a journey to get here. And I guess if you're scratching an itch or you have deep understanding and empathy for a given category or vertical of business verticals, and you have a deep experience with retail and you have deep experience with e-commerce, then by definition, you're going to be interested in audience and consumer intelligence and insights. That's going to be a natural thing that every business wants to understand their customers better. Every business wants to understand their ICP better. Every business wants to understand how they can acquire customers better, faster, easier, cheaper, with the right messaging in the right places. And so I guess at the end of the day, that is what separates the brands and businesses that are winning versus the ones that are losing, the ones that understand their customers' needs, wants, desires, everything that motivates them. The more you can understand that, the better off you're going to be able to tailor what you do for them. So I guess that is a natural place to end up in this industry. So it makes absolute sense. But really interestingly, in all transparency, we've never done a project together. I've never worked with i-Genie, so I have to go by what's on the website. But you talk about augmented intelligence for trend spotting, and you've got 6, at least as far as I can tell, you got 6 primary modules that sit underneath the i-Genie umbrella. But interestingly, product experience, and then you've got the 6 different components of the platform: Impact IQ, CX Bench, Brand Pulse, Trend Spotter, Innovate, and Presto. And all of these, you say that you deliver without surveys or focus groups. And you put a stat on here that's quite eye-opening. First of all, you say 2 things. Does anyone get excited about a 2-hour focus group or a $5 survey? Would you? Of course not. I think 99% of us would answer no to that question. And then you say also over 70% of marketing budgets have shifted to digital. The problem is, if your consumer insights haven't also shifted to being digital first, then you have to question, why is that, right? And is it because we didn't have the tooling? Is it because we weren't thinking laterally inside the business? Is it because they haven't met you or i-Genie yet? So why don't you tell us what i-Genie does and what makes it unique?
It's really the story of our founder, Stanley Natan, who was running consumer insights at Unilever. And so he was spending $350 million, right? That's how much brands spend on consumer insights, right? We all talk about data-driven decisioning and data powering, and we need faster data and better data to make decisions. And he was spending his money on surveys and focus groups and panels and things like that. And he got back this survey that said Hellmann's mayonnaise was doing really well in India. And he just kind of started scratching his head. He's like, we don't even sell Hellmann's mayonnaise in India. And it's like, that was like the canary in the coal mine, right? And he saw a lot. He's got so many great examples of this, many of which he's told me I can't share, but because he's been an insider for so long. But fundamentally, the data source surveys are problematic. And anybody who runs surveys agree that 40% of the respondents are fraud. So you got to throw out 40% of the responses. Another 20% are errored in some way. You got to throw out 60% of the responses. And a lot of the AI solutions out there are just trying to make surveys faster. We talk about synthetic data. Let's take our survey data and then create a synthetic copy of that that's 93% is good. I would argue 40. We could talk about why that is statistically, but like, it's still that fundamentally poor data source. And so I think the whole industry is like struggling. Like, how do we move from being able to questions consumers without directly asking them questions? Because the reality is, I use shampoo, I use hair care products, not once taken a product survey in my entire life. So who are these people? Are they even representative? On a survey, you can ask about 5 to 10 competitor brands. In hair care, they're 1,900. 1,900. So if you're asking about 5 or 10, do you even understand the market? And so you've got your sales data, you've got these other things, but you're trying to make connections and patterns using an incomplete data set. And to your point, everybody's moved online with these kind of rich kind of trails of what they're doing, of what we're searching for, right? I haven't taken a survey, product survey for consumer packaged goods ever, but I've certainly Google searched several of them today, right? And we've LLM searched them. And so what we do is we take those digital data sources, what people search for, what they post on social, the Facebooks, the Reddits, and the videos and reels. We actually transcribe the video into audio so that we can understand the context. We look at every comment that we like. We look at every rating and review for every single SKU in the category. We understand literally every SKU, every brand, every segment and subsegment. We understand the difference between in skincare, a serum, a toner, a cleanser. We understand all of that, so that when you leave that review for that anti-aging moisturizer of Neutrogena's, it's a signal about Neutrogena, it's a signal about that pigment, it's a signal about moisturizers, it's a signal about pistachio or whatever the ingredients are. And so we leverage these billions and billions of signals and we make sense of it, right? Because we understand every ingredient, every brand, everything, and then we can actually predict that. And so yeah, you're right, we have these 6 modules, but fundamentally, we can answer questions such as, what do people think of every product? What do they think of every brand? What can we predict out every trend? So it's not just understanding the now, but what is going to happen using the signals of the now, looking at velocities and accelerations across these multiple channels, looking at search as a signal of intent, real need, social, what people are talking about, how that influence happens on the consumer, reviews, what was the post-purchase product feedback cycle. If you can look at that as your entire marketing funnel, you've got most of everything. And AI thrives on big data sets, not hundreds of survey respondents, billions and billions of data points. The hard part is leveraging these algorithms, leveraging LLMs, deep learning models, machine learning to make sense of it all and provide it in both visualizations that are easy for customers to use, but also later we call Presto, which allows you to ask free form questions. And it's incredible that data is not, it's not hallucinating. You're not sure, like with Claude and ChatGPT, where it's coming up with the answer or why, if it's exhausted. It's all observable. It's all a walled garden of data with our KPIs, our metrics, our predictive algorithms. And you can ask follow-up questions and say, show me all of the ratings and reviews that mention product superiority around anti-aging for moisturizers of Neutrogena in the last, and how has it trended in the last 30 days? And we'll tell you just right on the spot within seconds. And so like our whole mantra is that customers don't want to talk to you, but they're happy to talk about you.
Yes.
And so if you can feed into that stream and get real-time data, you can start competing at digital speed. So that's what we do at i-Genie. And we do it for, I know I've been on a rant, but we do it for, you can tell I'm excited. We do it for Kenvue and Unilever and Coca-Cola, Anheuser-Busch, Clorox, Danone, the biggest brands in the world. And because Stan came from Unilever, he's got a global mindset. So we have native natural language processing in 20 different languages. We deployed in 30 countries. We can serve the most demanding brands and also the SMBs who are trying to leverage data to compete better. So that's what we do at i-Genie.
And you make a very good point, which is that AI thrives in a big data environment. It connects dots that humans would struggle to do in a month of Sundays. But that also necessarily means you have to have data sharing agreements and data ingestion agreements with the likes of Reddit, with the likes of Meta, with the likes of the credit card companies, with the likes of these e-commerce websites that may or may not want their reviews scraped, maybe even deals with Shopify so that you get access to all of their websites running their native reviews platform or a third-party reviews platform. So it feels the complexity, it's not just in what you've built as the intelligence layer, but it's also the data source layer. It feels like that's perhaps even the harder part of getting access to those pools of data in a compliant way that isn't just illegally scraping a bunch of websites. It feels like it's a full-time job in itself, just trying to get access to data in different markets, different industries, different verticals, different categories, and under very different regulatory regimes in different countries as well, and what you could do with it. And certainly trying to get data out of LLMs around what are the top queries, what are the responses you're giving, all that sort of stuff. This is truly a big data play, but that means you have to have access to big data to make it a big data play.
Absolutely. And in fact, over half of our team is on data, right? Data engineering, data scientists, trying to make sense of it all, trying to think about all the data ingestion challenges, changes to terms of service, what is the effect on downstream on our algorithms, our predictive analytics. It's constant, but at the same time, it's also super exciting, right? Because whether you're brands in the world, trying to do this themselves is just very difficult, right? Having a partner that's thinking about it. And, for example, LLM search, right? It depends, 2 to 5% of queries. And you could argue in certain categories that are more research heavy, probably a little bigger. For others, it's less, but it's also got more context, right? So the average LLM search is, kind of 14 words, whereas the average verbals, 3, 4, something like that. And so, you have actually more context. So then the question is, how do you interpret that context? And then how do you compare that context from LLM search versus Google search into one bucket called search? And that requires data scientists. And the data scientists are not inexpensive, right? That's the exciting part about it. But that's also where I think we're building something that's really useful because it's not easily replicable. We do have a lot of clients. Well, oh, you're just leveraging reviews data. I can get that from this provider. And I got social data. I got it from this provider. I'll build my own data lake and I'll build my own algorithms. And they've got IT teams internally that say, oh, we're powered by Cursor and we can build anything now. And they typically come back. We just one client come back in 6 months, but sometimes it's a little longer. And they realize this stuff is hard.
Yeah.
You get a new data source, that data source gets deprecated. What do you do about your algorithms moving forward? What about the going backwards, right? And do you keep this stuff going backwards, but now you've got a disconnect going forwards? And how do you explain that disconnect? How do you show that to the insights professionals and the people looking at the data in a way that they can explain it? Do you smooth out those curves? And so if you imagine these changes happening every single month and not having a practice around it, I think a lot of people don't think about the mortgage you pay on the things that you build. And I read a great article that it's not really build versus buy. It's buy now or buy later. It's a tremendous data challenge. It's an interesting one. Multi-languages, comparing trend entities in South Asia versus what's happening in Europe and making those connections. That's what gets us all up in the morning, solving the hard problems.
Yeah, and as someone who's tried to build a RAG pipeline on my own content, I could tell you that building it Lovable or Claude Code or whatever, building RAG pipeline that is scalable across billions of data points, etc., it is not an easy thing to do. And I'm someone who was just trying to build a RAG pipeline on my podcast episodes, and there was less than 700 of them. So the reality is that when you start getting into serious quantums of data, building a fast, efficient, reliable RAG pipeline for that then can even be queried in a meaningful way, it's a very interesting engineering challenge.
100%. I just within our architecture, I think we use at least three, but I think more like 4 or 5 different versions of ChatGPT,
Yep.
right? Because it's not only scalable, but cost effective,
Yeah.
right? And when you're dealing with small amounts of data, like a small review or a social post, you could use some of the older models that are much less expensive so
Yep.
that you can scale given that, like RAG is pretty bad. Lots of small pieces of data, and it's good with large,
Yes.
documents, right? So you have to have the right tool for the right piece of data. And so that's just ChatGPT and OpenAI. We also use Gemini. We also use we custom models. We use BERT and other natural language processing models that are highly customized. We use different tools for the same job in different languages because if you're in Tagalog
Oh
or
yeah, Spanish.
Vietnamese, it's this actually doesn't have a good enough sentiment model. We're going to have to use this other library, but we're going to have to tune it. And that's why when I talk about native natural language processing in ton of languages, that sounds a lot of people take something, translate it into English, do their insights, and translate it back to Arabic or whatever it is. And like that stuff doesn't work.
Yeah.
And it's those intricacies there that actually make a huge difference on success or failure. And the challenge, I think, part of it these days is I can support that language. But how?
Yeah.
And does it actually work?
Mm-hmm.
And does it, what, and I guess it's a little bit of, it used to be, there's so much kind of data. How do I get to information? Now with AI, you have access to all the data presented as information, but is it good information?
Mm-hmm.
Is it actionable?
Mm-hmm.
What's the hallucination? How did you come to that conclusion? What's the definition of good?
Mm-hmm.
So is my product launch doing well? You can ask ChatGPT or Claude, but ChatGPT or Claude gets to decide what good is.
Yes.
And how to weight things. And we've come up with algorithms that are actually predictive of market share. So we have a brand pulse score that is predictive of market share 0.7 to 0.8 correlation. So we could tell for 1,900 competitors in the hair care industry where their market share is going, often a couple months out. So we have a crystal ball. Like how valuable is that in business? That's the difference. It's got to be terrible to be a buyer of these things because everybody says yes to your RFP and you really got to get in there. And how do you do that? So
Yeah, absolutely. In the age of AI, everybody says they can do everything, but the reality is, to your point, do they do it well? And do they specialize in it? And especially in translation, we've had the guys from TransPerfect and a few other translation companies on the podcast before. And what they're trying to get to a place in with their technology, and it sounds like you are with yours, we want to understand meaning. We're not trying to translate individual words. We're trying to translate meaning. And that requires a very different approach than translating literal word by word or sentence by sentence. And so it takes a totally different level of technology, time, skill, understanding, data engineering. It's a whole different kettle of fish when you go from what old Google Translate used to be, which was pretty much just a word for word translation, to actually translating inference and meaning. And for example, being able to understand the difference between Mexican Spanish and Argentinian Spanish. There are distinct differences in meaning, and even the words that they use are very different. So the words I use here in Mexico, like when I go to Spain, we've been to Spain a few times, they just use different words for different things. It's that simple. And so if you don't understand that, then you could make an inference about meaning that is just plain wrong in that cultural context. And that's a big risk.
Yeah, 100%. There's French and there's Moroccan French. And those are different libraries.
And there's French Canadian.
And then, put on top of it, just talking about our brand pulse, right? Brand pulse, you've got standard dimensions of brand. What do people think of your price value equation, product superiority, loyalty, trust, et cetera, et cetera. But also might be one, you need that highly tuned, but two, it might be different category by category. So if I say body spray is sick, it's good. If I say yogurt made me sick, I think, right? Thinking about from a category to category perspective, how you tune the models and keywords and things like that are part of this, right? Be wary of general purpose technologies that attack all these things when context matters. right? And depending on the sensitivity and for example, if you're looking at adverse effects, very, very careful. We don't do that, just to be clear. It's something where there's just a higher degree of like regulatory oversight and responsibility on the data. Right sizing based on what you're trying to do, a level of risk with a level of kind of wobbliness is important.
And when most of your clients come to you for the first time, they meet you for the first time, they maybe get a demo for the first time, what is it that they're typically trying to achieve in that first 1, 2, 3 months with you that they've just simply never found a way to achieve it before? Is it effectively a chat interface that they can ask any question about their market to and have relevant answers come back at them? Is it effectively a brand marketer's paradise where they can ask it almost anything at any time through any lens and they're going to get some kind of valuable, relevant? I guess my question is, are they expecting it to replace all other market research that they are doing in their business with a singular tool, singular throat to choke?
Yeah. So look, there are different tools for different applications. And we started this call with talking about how terrible surveys are. There's a role for surveys,
Yeah.
right? If you've got a new product that you want to test with consumers, there's nothing out there that gives any reaction as to what they think of a product they've never seen.
Yes.
So there are a couple different applications where surveys still make sense. The types we typically appeal to three audiences. One is the insights function, which is generally actually serving the other two functions. And we could talk about that for them, just having this kind of general purpose platform, this new operating system for next generation consumer insights, that are more like decision grade data, I think is a big piece of that. They have lots of different needs that are being thrust upon them by the organization. By marketing is the second, and by innovation. So let's talk about the two. For marketing, because you talked about brand marketing, is the brand marketer's dream? Absolutely. And I'm paid to say that as the CEO, of course. I was on the call with the skincare brand, and we can see their product superiority going down. I was giving a demo. It's just, well, why? And there's been a bunch of reasons. And one of the reasons was product packaging, right? And so people thought product wasn't as good, the packaging wasn't as nice. I've heard we've had packaging issues, but I don't know what they are. So I was like, let's ask Presto. What are the packaging issues? Can you tell me what the key causes are, the key themes, topics, and any verbatims to illustrate it to me? I don't know, 15 seconds later, they have this like flower dispenser of their skincare and it gets fogged. And then the cap leaks and their complaints about it peaked in October and November, and we're down 30% in Q1. And like, it's these SKUs, and here's specific reviews of people complaining. And just, what? Like, I've been hearing about this for a month and not getting an answer. You were able to answer it in 15 seconds. And I was like, no, because we have access to real signals from real people. You go from the high level down to the low level, et cetera. The thing is, brand equity tracking is typically quarterly, annually, takes weeks, months. It's like a postmortem. It's not actionable. Now people are using it for actions. I'll give you another example. One of our clients is in the vitamins, minerals, and supplement space, was looking at sales data. We don't replace sales data.
Yeah.
You still need sales data. So we don't replace it. But they saw a competitor taking share. And they said, okay, what's going on? So they looked at the brand pulse data, and the competitor's brand pulse score was down. And they're like, well, how could they be getting more sales? Well, the brand pulse down. So the brand were down. So that like less intent to buy. So they figured, it's just like a temporary marketing activation. They were just spending a lot of money. And then they looked at the reviews. The negative sentiment about that competitor company was up 150%. And they said, okay, well, that's an interesting thing. Why? And then the topics were around taste and texture, right? And so they said, okay, what do people think about our taste and texture? Because that other company had just reformulated and clearly not going well. And they're like, oh, we didn't know. We have significant strength in taste and texture. Let's launch a marketing campaign. And they did that. All of this happens in 45 days. Discovery of a competitive threat, understanding the magnitude of it, understanding how to counterattack it and take action. And that's like what it means to compete in digital speed. And so turning what is traditional old legacy data into things that are more actionable, real time, granular, able to get and easily socialized, right? Because there's always a follow-on question, right?
Yeah.
There's been, well, now we discovered this. Okay, what's the next question? What's the next question? Each of those iterations, traditional research or architecture takes a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Send up a request, and there's a couple weeks, we get the answer back. Okay, what's our next follow-up question? This all can be done in seconds. And so to me, it's given the kind of complexities of multi-channel, and you want to look at specifically what's going on at Target or Walmart or Amazon, or compare the two. We had one client who discovered unusual numbers of packaging issues on boots in the UK. They're like, what's going on? How can we have packaging issues on one retailer? A counterfeiter showed up. They were able to detect it through what people were saying. I like that. It's those type of things, that type of intelligence that reads action quickly, that I think win markets. That's brand marketer. You can look at how your digital campaigns are actually affecting engagement online, your influencers versus their influencers, your share of voice, because we're looking at the whole market, not just a couple. But then there's innovation, where you really want to see what are the trends down the line. And we're incredibly adept at looking at trends by looking at search, social, and new product launch data. A lot of people use social data only, but it's very sensitive to spikes and fads.
Yes.
We can actually see real intent along with that conversation. And so we use that using some predictive kind of deep learning models to say what's going to be big 18 months from now. And we can also actually suggest new products would actually meet those trends or leverage that trend data. And just to give you a sense, we work with one of the largest cleaning companies in the world. They spend millions and millions of dollars on new product innovation ideas. They said, let's test your ideas versus ours. We'll take 20 of our ideas that we're incubating versus 10 of yours and see how we do. 9 of the 10 top ideas, according to consumers, were ours, thereabouts. And we can get to those ideas instead of 18 months, which is typical innovation cycle before supply chain and manufacturing and launch, down to 2 to 3 months. As opposed to being a big brand that's launching products 3 years after you discover a trend,
Yes.
you can now do it in 6 months. And so that's that. Now you can catch the trends, right? And that's really, how you win markets.
And when they first see this in action, does it feel like magic to them? Does it feel like, okay, we don't know exactly how this works, but it feels like magic to us?
So presto sometimes just drops jaws. That said, initial reaction is, as if you've ever been in a magic show,
Yes.
skepticism.
Yes. Yeah.
That data can't think. That data really right?
Yeah.
Is it hallucinating? And those are all the right questions, especially because we all get shown a lot of magic.
Yep.
Every day. I don't envy the people who have to make technology decisions these days. And this is why trust is so important. Our existing clients are expanding 146% year over year. Like it's just, and so we've got the biggest brands to prove the value of what we do, because people see it and part of them are like, I don't know if that's real. Like, even if they have it, like one of the things for us is imagine having this tool in everybody's pocket, the CEO, the CMO. But if I'm an insights professional, I'm also like, I'm terrified. What if I do this to the CEO?
Yeah.
What if I do this to the CMO? I really empathize with the challenges that they have and can really thoroughly test and do a couple categories, do a couple geographies, test it in some of the toughest languages, whether it's Tagalog or Japanese. The Chinese market for data, you talked about regulatory and just from the dynamic perspective, it's all crazy to manage. Test those things out deeply and see if you can get the insights and the actions you need to change the business. And when you prove that, then we are very successful at that. It's magic and skepticism.
And do they ask questions of you or of the system that they already know the answers to, that they've already done through their own insights, their own research, their own whatever, and then they go, okay, I'm going to ask it a question I know the answer to, and I'm going to see if the answer it gives back matches the data that I have through my existing systems or relationships or sales data or whatever it is.
100%. And you absolutely should do that, especially to test the confidence in every data. We were talking about brand pulse, right? So we had one very large company. Okay, well, let's do this. And it says, your brand pulse score says we're going down, but my brand equity study says our brand equity is going up. How's your market share? It's going down. So which one do you think is right? And then it's we don't fully know why. It's like, let's do the diagnosis. And then we can break it down and go from here's my general feeling to how do you create an actionable framework? And that's ultimately, like, we've got to move away from these kind of vanity metrics we report to each other. Everybody wants that. I tell my team, we want to spend less time measuring the data and more time moving the data, right? And getting to the actions that move the data are always so critical and really hard unless you can get a consensus. And the problem with a lot of these data sources is they conflict. And then you get a pick, and there's a lot of debate, and there's a lot of feeling
A
and
lot of
bias,
noise.
and a lot of noise and a lot of paralysis.
Yeah.
And if you look at it, the large incumbents are losing share to the disruptors because they simply can move faster.
Yeah.
And so we just got to help empower the incumbents to have the data advantage that they have, coupled with the speed to insight and action. Stan likes to say, going from the what to the so what to the now what.
Yeah.
And we got to get to the now what. They have resources, but because of the paralysis, often they let the disruptor brands take share. And then in the end, they buy the disruptor brands for hundreds of millions of dollars when they could have just capitalized on the trend itself. One example is one of the largest brands in the world, skincare, caught the collagen trend because of us. And one product is $70 million in revenue because of it, right? And so you just can't be behind on those things, especially for kind of real and coal type trends.
Yeah. Yeah. I think of trends like probiotics. I think of the mega trends in health, longevity, in so many areas. It's those trends, oftentimes they're emerging in the shadows before they ever pop their head up into the mainstream. And they're on message boards, they're on Reddit, they're talked about on social, they're talked about in places that they don't emerge onto websites because those websites oftentimes aren't selling products in those categories yet, or they're not selling products that match that demand well enough to get sales data yet. And so it becomes a really difficult thing to understand. Is this a short-term fad or is this a long-term trend change? That when something, because it could start out as a fad, but sometimes it's like popcorn. Sometimes it pops, sometimes it doesn't. So sometimes the fad does turn into a trend. Sometimes it's relegated to dying out as a fad, right? So I think those transition points where something goes from a fad to a trend, those are the things you really want to identify, right? And those are the things that are probably the hardest to identify in the market.
Yeah. And look, this is why leveraging different data sources is critical, because it's not just what people are talking about. It's what in the back corners they're actually searching for and expressing need for.
Yeah.
Especially in things like we do work in feminine care.
Yes.
You can also get distorted signals just in cleaning products, as an example. So if you look at cleaning products, people love tomato stains and oil stains.
Yep.
You know what they're really searching for? Blood stains. They just don't want to talk about it.
Yes.
Another example is we work in the dairy industry. We talk to a variety of people in the dairy industry, and a lot of them miss protein. It's so in your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
It's part of like, how could you possibly miss it? Like, my wife's an influencer. I hear it all day. And it's fun. It's actually funny going into our like vitamins, minerals, and supplements trends and seeing what we predicted 18 months ago and then what's in my cupboard. It's the creatines. It's like everything. It's just like literally we predicted what is now in my cupboard 18 months later. And it's just all in my cupboard. And
yeah, I take about 20 different supplements a day, so I'm right with you. And
yeah.
I've been supplementing since I was a kid, literally since I was a kid, because vitamins, minerals, and all the rest were very important to my family when we were young. I was taught to supplement from my parents, and I've just carried that on. And now, obviously, my supplement regime has changed over the years. Suppliers have changed. What I supplement with has changed even as I age, things like that. But definitely getting into that routine of supplementation, that has been a lifelong thing for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you can see it start creeping up early on search, and the trends show up on search 6 months earlier. And then you see how well do they convert to social? What does that lead to in conversations? What's the net sentiment of those conversations? Is it negative? Is it positive? What's the engagement on average of those things? What channels are these trends on? And are those the most viral channels? That the predictive models can look at all of these signals in a way that's much more meaningful than my 14-year-old daughter says this is important, and which is shocking. Like that one of my favorite illustrators is Marketunist. I don't know if you know. So everybody who listens to this podcast or on YouTube, just go to he at the end. Just hilarious. He's just hilarious and self-deprecating marketing humor. But like one of it's, I'm glad we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on all this research. I guess we're just going to go with the product that our boss's 14-year-old daughter recommended.
Yeah,
which is what happens with back ribs.
Yeah,
it's about eliminating human bias. It's looking at big data, looking at the different trends, identifying the different modalities of our minds and our actions online, of search and intent, of what we promote and how we are influenced, of what post-purchase people think of the products and how that also influences our buying process. That's our virtual shopping journey, and every point along it. Instrument that is just highly valuable. Should be part of everybody's toolkit.
And you are trying to democratize it. How do you guys make your money? You're a SaaS platform. Anybody can access it. Do you have tiers? How do you make this accessible to SMBs? Or is it really, you need to be doing, I don't know, $10 million a year before it starts making sense for you?
Yeah, to give you a sense of how deeply Stan, our founder, cares about insights and changing the game, you get unlimited seats. Like, as the CEO who's trying to maximize revenue, I'm
Yeah.
like, Stan, we got to get to per seat pricing. He's like, no, you get the data, you should share it with everybody in the organization. And he's right. I mean, he's absolutely right. So we do a lot to democratize that. And it's not cheap, right? To get information about every SKU, every brand in a category, you're typically looking at spending, our least expensive products are $20,000 a year. Our most expensive products are around $45,000 a year. And that includes cloud support and whole support package. But that's just for one category in one country. You can imagine as you do multiple categories, oral care, hair care, skin care, et cetera, across multiple countries, starts adding up. And we have a variety of seven-figure clients. So to answer your question more directly, right now we're focused on over $500 million in revenue. We do have a bunch of brands that do 100 to 500, and less than that, they just don't feel like they have the budget for it or the need for it. I think that's changing. We have a couple of new products that we're launching that are in that kind of 10, 20K range that are just out of the box and easy and just so useful that I think, we're going to go after that market. We're really an enterprise sale, and we do really well. Like, we're launched in over 30 countries. So that's been the focus to date.
It's easier to start, in my experience, working with many different software companies over the years, far easier to start an enterprise, come down than it is to start SMB and move up.
It depends on the market. LocalVox, which was one of the companies I founded, we started with SMB and moved up. It's a different type of challenge. It's easier to get those initial sales, but then it's harder to adapt the platform because you didn't really build it for, global expansion and some of the enterprise needs. And it's usually pretty hard to adapt software once it's architected one way to another. It's a lot easier to dummy down software, to your point.
Yeah.
But getting those first enterprise clients is often much more difficult.
Yeah.
And this is where having a team, Stan Sananathan, who insights at Unilever and Coca-Cola, has the Lifetime Achievement Award in the industry. He knows everybody. That gave us a lot of credibility to start. It's an industry that expects a lot of service and support that you can wrap around it and do a very custom delivery at first. So part of it is like how our clients have led us to understand what products we need to develop and productize them over time. Like enterprise sale myself, I remember calling single location businesses as the CEO of a company or president of the company, actually, and just not arguing, but asking them, why they hadn't paid their $120 a month bill. And it's just, I remember after doing that and growing the company over 100 people and big revenues, the next job, I got a check for $300,000. And just out there looking at it, it was like, do you know how many $120 conversations?
God.
So it's a different type of challenge. And ultimately, I'd rather be.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Business.
Yeah, no question. Is there anything you don't do today that you look out in the market and you say, well, we don't do this today, but it's high priority for us. Give us 6, 12, 18 months and we will be doing that thing. Or is there anything your customers are already asking you for that you don't yet do that you go, yep, cool. It's on our radar, high priority. Give us 6 months. We'll have that functionality in your hands.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what's 12 months down the line. Right now, we're adding LLM search, which is obviously on everybody's mind as a brand equity signal, trend signal, et cetera. So that's happening this quarter. So that's exciting. If you think about what you can do when you have data about every product, every ingredient, every trend, there's a lot of interesting applications. One of the things we're going to launch is a new product launch monitor. So there's a company called Mintel. A lot of people buy their data to look at new product launches at brick and mortar. But the number of launches online are 5 to 10x as many, right? Because it's easier to do D2C and all these things. So we have a better data source for new product launches. So we're going to launch something around you kind of being able to track your competitors, track launches, track how does your launch compare to all these other launches that are analogous to the post sale, looking at review volumes, social volumes, things like that, so you can benchmark it. I think that's exciting. We are going to go into other markets. A lot of the things that we're talking about, sentiment about brands, about other things, highly analogous. We find a fun racing team. Can't tell you which one, but they're very highly secretive, which is funny. It makes sense given their supplier relationships, but so we can apply these towards sports, to entertainment, to autos, to finance, to telcos.
And any desire or demand for the B2B world, like a pure B2B hard goods world. So manufacturers selling, distributors selling to dealers. We're talking industrial supply chains. We're talking HVAC. We're talking plumbing. We're talking electrical. We're talking these huge distribution companies. In some cases, they've got 5 million SKUs, et cetera, et cetera. Like, where do you guys fall on the spectrum of B2B services versus, it sounds like you're very heavily retail focused, obviously. Do you see any demand or need for your type of services in the B2B space?
Same needs.
Yeah.
Unclear whether we can serve it well.
Okay.
Right. The hard part about being a startup CEO is saying no to.
Yes.
I will tell you that we have one of the largest ingredients companies in the world, fragrances and other things they provide towards beauty industry, pet industry, vitamins, minerals, supplement industry, et cetera. And they're trying to figure out trends and what's going on in the industry as a whole and who's, movers and shakers, because that's really exciting to them. But it's still pretty cool. It's the second B, the B to the B,
Yes,
is our customer. So understanding what's going to be relevant for your end customer is important to that supplier. And ultimately, I think that I've looked at like some of these tools in a B2B context as a B2B startup entrepreneur. Like, I want that information for myself as well. One of our products is actually pretty relevant. It's called Impact IQ, where you look at the share of voice, share of meaningful engagement, other things. But it depends on whether there's a lot of social chatter about it. And we can pull in things like reviews from stores or G2s and Trustpilot and things like that, which differentiated it is, right? And ultimately, I think it's a distraction.
I love it. I love it. If you could sprinkle fairy dust on the, let's just call it consumer insights industry, and change one thing about it at the snap of your fingers, what would that be?
It's a good question. They're very conservative. And I've seen this playbook before, right? Where you have this disruptive change that's coming. And if you don't lean into the change, you get swept away from it. And I think right now you're seeing budgets being cut at a lot of companies when they should be increasing them because the value of data is higher rather than lower. That one of the reasons that Stan is so well renowned in the industry is because he built a culture at Unilever where they tested a lot of solutions, knowing that a lot of them will fail. But the only way they could find the best ones or what actually works is through testing. And right now, I think that the big incumbent brands are trying to figure out how to keep profits high, focus on the P&L, and I get it. But right now, there's this big question of like, where does data decisioning live? Right now, is it centralized in insights where they're a gatekeeper for insights? Or do they become the enabler of insightfulness across the organization? And I'm stealing that term.
Yes.
I'm trying to remember if it's Vijay Raj at Unilever or James Cummings at Kenvue. We did a webinar recently on our website on build versus buy for AI. But that's a big question.
Yeah.
And it's a question about, would you want to give Presto to your CEO, your CMO, et cetera? We've got to get to a point where you open it up, because if you don't provide that data innovation, they're going to build those capabilities themselves. The marketing industry already is using digital signals, and they will keep on encroaching and encroaching, whether you like it or not. The question is, are you part of that story?
Yeah.
Stan says, if you're not at the table, you're the one who's for dinner, right? And so I really empathize. They're in a very difficult spot. I would say you have to be a little bit more adventurous. You have to difficult. There's a lot of people selling a lot of fairy dust. And so try a lot of things, see what works. Advocate for budget, move budget from things that aren't working. Even if people are holding tight to it, make those difficult decisions, knowing that the way you make decisions and in your organizations can change very dramatically over the next 5 to 10 years. And you're going to be driving that vision, because that's what insights is about, right?
Yeah.
Insights is that if I've got complex data, I'm the one that can help you make that decision.
Yeah.
And you've got to lean into that and be a little bit more bold. And I think that will pay dividends to everybody who takes that philosophy. Maybe not. Actually, that's not fair. That'll get a lot of people fired.
Yeah.
A bunch of different organizations.
Yeah.
That advice, and that's true. So you've got to navigate your organization the way you're at. I just want that the very best would be to change the organizational culture to enable that type of experimentation so that they can compete better.
So maybe change the mindset to be a little bit more like VCs, where they focus on the power law. They only need one out of 10 of their investments to really hit to pay off the other 9 losses and be very successful. On top, be willing to take a few more chances, to swing at a few more pitches, and really treat it as a learning process as opposed to treating it as a pass or fail. Treating it very much as we have to do this. If we don't do this, someone who doesn't have our legacy, someone who doesn't have our level of revenue, someone who doesn't have our level of process entrenchment, or as I like to call it, calcification, someone who's new is going to be much more nimble because they have no bar that they have to measure up to, no legacy bar that they have to measure up to. And so it's better to disrupt from within than from without.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's insights professionals will be asked to do more with less already. So the thought that they can add more capacity to do these things is almost unfathomable. My favorite cartoon, and I go to it at least once a month with the team, is a cartoon of cavemen in a wheelbarrow hauling rocks with a wheelbarrow. It's got square wheels. And another caveman comes and says, "Hey guys, I got a great idea." And it's a round wheel. And they look back to him and say, "No, I'm too busy." That's fundamentally what happens at startups all the time. You're always so busy. Like, it's so hard to build the wheels of your business to help it scale. Absolutely. Insights professionals face the kind of same. If you're already doing more with less, and now you're telling me I gotta find resource to experiment with 10 different technology solutions. Do you know what procurement looks like? Do you know how much effort that is? I get it. It's hard. And that's why if I had all the fairy dust to enable people to look at what's out there and what really works, I would do it.
I love it. Now, I will drop a link to your LinkedIn profile and your website in the show notes. Other than that, how do you like people to get a hold of you, reach out, and have a conversation about the things we've talked about today?
I'm prolific on LinkedIn, which means I post a lot and I interact a lot. I respond to almost every message. As you can tell, I'm really passionate about this. I like to connect with like-minded individuals, talk about different ideas. It helps me grow as a professional. So LinkedIn is always the best. If you're interested in the technology on the brand side, also come reach out via our website and get a demo, because
I love that. I absolutely love it. Listen, as we do come down to the end of our time together, this is where I get to flip the script. I get to hand the microphone over to you. I get to let you ask me one question, any question you like. It could be personal or professional. Mr. Trevor Sumner from i-Genie AI, what is your question for me today?
you've heard a bunch about what we do at i-Genie. What do you think are the most exciting ways that brands could be leveraging data differently to drive different outcomes for themselves?
Great question. Look, I don't profess to be an expert brand guy or an expert marketer by any stretch of the imagination, but I definitely do see some of the things that you alluded to before, which is that because I'm consulting almost exclusively in the B2B world, so manufacturers, distributors, wholesalers, etc. And that part of the industry from an e-commerce perspective is 5, 10, 15 years behind where retail e-commerce is. And so I think that both sides, both retail e-commerce players and B2B e-commerce or B2B players that maybe are just starting down the e-commerce path or just starting to have a level of digital enablement that they've never had before. The retail e-commerce side can learn so much about belly-to-belly selling. They can learn so much about personalization that happens in the B2B world that just doesn't exist in the B2C and D2C world. They can learn about channel conflict and pricing models and all sorts of cool stuff. And they can just learn so much from B2B. And B2B, on the other hand, can understand digital innovation and digital marketing and digital customer acquisition. They can learn so much from retail e-commerce. And so for me, I am all about cross-pollination of ideas and cross-pollination of thinking, right? And so since I spent like the first half of my career very heavily focused on retail e-commerce and the latter half of my career very focused on B2B, I see both sides and I see the value of the thinking from both sides. And so I guess I would say to translate that into your industry and consumer insights, the fact that You have very old school ways of doing things. You have very new school ways of doing things, and never the twain shall meet sometimes. And you have, and I'll give an example. So in B2B procurement, as of the end of 2024, Forrester showed through some research that they did that over 70% of B2B buyers today are millennials and Gen Z, meaning they're digital natives. Okay. So the buying demographic has changed, but the selling demographic has not so much. So we have 30-year veterans in B2B sales in their category, their vertical, whatever it is, and they're absolute experts. And they think the way we've always done it is the way we should be doing it, right? The young guns, they're like, hey, we should be doing it this way, and we should be leveraging technology to the max because the people we're supplying to want to be able to use technology to buy through us. And the truth lies somewhere in the middle, meaning that this tribal and institutional knowledge in the business is massively valuable, but we have to digitalize it in such a way that it becomes one-to-many capability instead of one-to-one capability. And the young guns need to realize these people with 30 years of experience in their vertical, they know a lot of shit. And they know a lot of shit that can help you do your job better. It can help you connect with your customers better if you just have enough humility to sit down and listen to them. And so I think bridging the generational gap is just as important as bridging the technical gap. That's where my thoughts are.
A good reminder of how do you democratize institutional knowledge and especially right now, especially with like new generations coming up who are in the age of AI and thinking through what few opportunities there are for mentorship. I think
Oh, you couldn't be more. Listen, fabulous conversation. Super appreciate your time. Really appreciate you spending the afternoon with me. And I wish you every continuing success with i-Genie. And I can't wait to speak to you again soon. Thank you so much. Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.